Right, welcome and good afternoon to my first ever Health and Wellbeing Board. So bear with me. I'd like to welcome everybody this afternoon and in person and on Zoom, which we finally got connected. Busy agenda, so I may have to move you along. And first of all, the practical matters that you hear every time. There is no planned fire alarm this afternoon, so if it does go off, please leave in an orderly fashion by your nearest exit. The rallying point is at the rear of the car park. Points of procedure: I'd like to remind members of the board to raise their hands if they wish to speak, and make sure your microphones are switched on. And I will refer to Jane from Democratic Services if I need to record a vote for or against any procedural matters. Thank you. So moving first to apologies. Jane, have we received any apologies?
Yes, Chair, we've received apologies from Louise Platt and Duncan Fury.
Thank you very much. So this is to confirm that this is a record of meeting of the Rutland Health and Wellbeing meetings last held on the 21st of March. So I'll propose the minutes. Can I have a seconder who was present, please? Thank you very much. And all those in favour, please raise your hand. That looks like lots of people. And those against, please raise your hand. Any abstentions? No, thank you very much. Thank you. So I'll move on to actions arising. We've got 11 actions. Most seem to involve Catherine. So number one, reference number 3, the falls data. So I'd like to hand over to Catherine Willison, sorry, please.
Shall I cover that later because it's on the agenda?
Thank you very much for that one. Number 2 is the Health and Wellbeing Integration Lead. Have you emailed the details, etc.?
Again, covered later on the agenda. Thank you.
Number 3, Deborah Mitchell. Have you liaised with Mitch Harper on the JSNA work streams?
We have, and we've included a timetable in the IDG meeting, and therefore we can mark that as closed. Thank you.
Closed, thank you. Okay. So number 4, Mitch Harper was to meet with representatives from NHS Dentistry.
Yes, that's all done. So we've reviewed data and I've shared the needs assessment.
You'll come back later. Number 5, Sarah Prima to share a draft copy of the joint 5-year forward plan.
Yeah, that's complete. The Health and Wellbeing Board have seen it.
Sorry, can you say that again, Sarah?
Yeah, that's complete. The Health and Wellbeing Board have seen it.
Lovely. Yeah. Thank you. Sarah Prima and Paul Sheldon to look at palliative care facilities at RMH.
I can just confirm there's one palliative care bed at RMH, which is flexible use.
One bed flexible, thank you very much. Unfortunately, Samantha's no longer here. So number 7, Samantha and Mike Sands to meet to decide information for NHS England. Mike, it's on you.
So you're right. Don't give me an action because the person involved just then loses their seat. I did meet with Sam. I would suggest, I kind of alluded to this yesterday when we had our induction meeting, right, about vaccination, immunisation, and the need to get hold of kind of sub-patch analysis. So we're not just getting the kind of whole Rutland coverage. HPV was a particular kind of issue around that one. Yeah. So let's meet outside and I'll give you a brief on HPV. Keep the action open but it's your call whether you want it to come here, but it's still basically, I think the meeting would be, if there's an interest in HPV still and we can discuss that, then the extra data would be the kind of sub-patch analysis. Right. But obviously it's your decision now.
It is, but I've got Janet asking.
Yeah, sorry, can I just suggest, and it is a suggestion only, that alongside HPV you also consider shingles, because further down the agenda,
yes,
it says that Rutland is underperforming on the shingles vaccine.
Would that be acceptable?
Would be, that's what, I mean, I think as I was saying, in terms of the data, it's probably worthwhile just doing a bit of an update to the board on vaccination immunisation more generally, because there are consistent issues either with adult vaccination or children's
Right.
ones where our coverage is good, but it masks a load of issues underneath in terms of which parts of the population are good and bad. And that level of detail is probably what board need to see.
Right, okay. And I've got some nods from my right here. Children. Children. Okay, number 8 is, where are we? Yeah, number 8 is covered by 13B. Sorry, 13B, which is Deborah again, the IDG subgroup.
So unfortunately, the meeting between me and Councillor Harvey didn't happen because of illness. So it's something, Chair, I'd like to pick up with you after the board meeting, please.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
thank you. Number 9, Mark Young to distribute mental health pathways once they've been approved. But Mark, sorry, call him Mike now. Mark's not
I'm
here.
aware he's been off poorly, so he may not have done that, but
Right.
so if we change the action to Emma Jane Holland, please, then she can feed back.
Lovely, thank you very much. Do we need a time frame on that? Sorry,
I'm sure they'll do it as soon as possible.
right.
Yeah,
It
but
just
so
one of
if you want time frame, Chair, that's absolutely
I
fine.
like time frames.
Yeah, we can do
Sorry,
that.
you see, that's one of my things that I like. Then I know where I'm meant to be.
What
So-
time frame? Do you
Oh, I
want?
don't mind. What's a reasonable time frame?
Well, shall we say? I don't, 2, yeah. Shall we say 2 weeks, just because in case Mark does come back and then he can do it,
Right.
and
And to review again, yeah.
yeah.
But I always believe in under offering and over promising.
Yeah.
So should we make it 3 weeks?
Yeah, 3 weeks is fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Underwood to distribute the Health Watch Rutland's report on dementia.
Yeah, that's done.
That's done, yes, thank you. And Jane, did you distribute the draft agenda?
I did, Chair, action completed.
Thank you. Lovely. Okay, so that's bits later, bit outside, some finished. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest this afternoon? Anyone relevant? No, none. Okay, moving on to number 5, petitions, deputations and questions. Jane, have we received any petitions or deputations?
Yes, Chair, we have received 1 deputation from Mrs Jennifer Fenelon on behalf of the Rutland Health and Social Care Policy Consortium. The deputation has been approved by the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer and has been added to the website and circulated to board members in advance of the meeting. As per Procedure Rule 73, the total time allowed for presenting a deputation is 5 minutes, and board members may ask questions of the members of the deputation for a further period of not more than 5 minutes. These questions shall be asked and answered without discussion. I shall now ask Mrs Fenelon to approach the table. If you'd like to take a seat at the bottom, please, Mrs Fenelon, thank you.
Madam Chairman, before we start, could I just say that it's always difficult to hear in that area, but today we can't hear a word. So I may contradict some of the answers that have been given because we just didn't hear any of the answers at all. Dear Councillor Ellison, first, the purpose of this deputation. It's submitted by the Rutland Health and Social Care Policies Consortium, and in it we express our concerns about the preparation, content and proposed implementation of the first Leicester and Rutland 5-year joint forward plan. We believe the consequences for Rutland residents are potentially serious. Second, the guidance and issues of concern. Rutland County Council, via its Health and Wellbeing Board, discharged its legal duty to prepare, consult upon and approve a health strategy for Rutland in April 22. It covered 7 target areas from birth to death. In December 22, the NHS issued very explicit instructions to ICBs on the production of their 5-year plans and supporting strategies, including consultation, by the 30th of June 2023. This guidance includes the statutory requirements that ICB must meet. The guidance says ICBs and their partner trusts are subject to a general legal duty to involve each health and wellbeing board whose area coincides with that of the ICB, wholly or in part. The plan must describe how the ICB proposes to implement relevant local health strategies. The ICB is required to engage or consult on its draft plan with, quote, people and communities that will be affected by the specific parts of the proposed plan, or who are likely to have a significant interest in any of its objectives. The ICB has also responsibility for preparing the necessary operational, financial, capital, staffing and IT strategies, and to incorporate them within the joint plan. The ICB was warned in December 22 that consultation would be difficult during local authority elections, and its officers undertook to find a way of resolving these difficulties. We as a consortium tried without success to find details of the agreed alternative process to be used. On inquiring of the group responsible for approving the ICB processes, we were told that they had instead looked at the results of previous consultations. By June 23, we were concerned not only at the lack of engagement in Rutland, but also complete lack of an implementation plan for Rutland. The fact that priorities have been changed and lack of supporting implementation strategies, we therefore commissioned an independent review of the ICB's implementation of the guidance. Its conclusions are damning. The upshot is that neither the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board nor the Rutland population served has formally received and considered a draft joint forward plan. The agenda today contains a 10-minute verbal update, but neither the results of consultation, which ended on the 7th of June, nor the draft plan itself have been made available to the board for its consideration. In order to finalise the 5-year plan by the 30th of June 23, the guidance states the joint forward plan must include a statement of final opinion of each Health Watch board consulted. It must be sent to the ICB with a copy to NHS England. Lastly, our recommendation. We believe that the ICB has not discharged its legal and moral duties, and we urge the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board to withhold its statement of final opinion until national guidance is met and the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board is reassured that the plan meets the needs of our community. Thank you. Sorry to have shouted, but it was one at the back.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Fenelon?
Sorry, Chair. I mean, it's I suppose the question: how does one respond? Because I know, Jennifer, you refer to a report which is damning, and then but I suppose it's difficult to comment without seeing the detail of it.
No, we don't ask you to comment on that, but it confirmed our fears. It independently and systematically went through all the guidance and whether it had been met or not. Happy to share it with you. I think we're more concerned that the guidance is implemented.
Yeah, I'm looking at Sarah. I suppose jointly as a bit of kind of like, yes, I fully accept what you're saying. Just, but it's almost like, actually, can we have a look over it and just see where it fits?
Happy to share it. The chair has received a copy.
We have a copy. I have a copy of that, so I'll make sure it's distributed. Can't say that word. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Fenelon. We will note your comments. I can't get that. Can I leave it on? Is that okay? No, I can't. I'm being told I can't. So we have worked closely with stakeholders and Rutland Health Watch in particular as part of the Integrated Delivery Board. I think we believe that residents have had a chance to comment, and we have collected those comments and forwarded them. So I think that bit has been done, and we've actually had a reply from the board as well to our initial comments. So that bit I would update. Okay, thank you very much for that. Going on to number 6. Questions with notice from members. Do we have any questions with notice from members, Jane?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Number 7, notices of motion from members. Any notices with motion, Jane?
None received, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. So number 8, going on to the election of vice chair. I am on my own and I need help. So we would like to appoint a vice chair for the municipal year 2023-24. Do I have any nominations? Sorry. Yes, thank you, Deborah.
Could I nominate Mike? Because he sat opposite me.
Yes, that's a very good reason for choosing to nominate Mike. Any further nominations? No. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Dr. Underwood. So those in favour of Mike Sands being my vice chair, please put their hands up. Can I put mine up?
Thank you.
And anyone wish to abstain? Don't you do that. I bribed you earlier. Okay, so no, seriously, thank you very much for that, Mike. So we will be in communication. Number 9. Okay, here we go. So the Leicestershire and Rutland Integrated Care Systems update. So we now have the verbal update from Sarah Prima. Over to you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you and afternoon, everybody. So I'm just going to give you a brief update on the 5-year plan for the ICB and then also the Health and Wellbeing Partnership Strategy, which will be quite short. So in terms of the 5-year plan, members will be aware that the development of that plan has been ongoing over the past few months with lots of stakeholders and our partners. And it has accumulated in a set of priority areas that we want to focus on as an ICB. And those priority areas have been gained from using the JSNA information, our public insights, and identification of areas where we know we need to make improvements, where we consistently get feedback, particularly from the public, about where improvements need to be made. It aligns to other strategies, so we have taken into account the health and wellbeing strategies across each of the unitary authorities in LLR, and we've also taken into account the health plan that was developed for Rutland, and you'll see in some of the priority areas they are aligned to those priorities that are in those strategies, such as care close to home, prevention, etc., health inequalities. The plan itself is underpinned by a number of supporting strategies, such as our workforce strategy, our IT and digital plan, and our financial strategy, which are all referenced in the 5-year plan and support. They support the delivery of that plan. We agreed quite early on we didn't want this plan to duplicate other plans, so health and wellbeing strategies we weren't going to duplicate, and we weren't going to duplicate some of those underpinning strategies that are already there. So they are referenced in the plan as supporting strategies rather than being duplicated. And that's an approach that a lot of areas have taken. We're also in the process of just finalising a delivery plan that will sit alongside the 5-year plan that gives a bit more detail about how we're going to deliver the individual elements. And the plan has been considered by members of the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board. And as Chair has mentioned, we've got feedback and we've incorporated that into the final version. As well as ongoing insights from our public that we've used to develop the plan, we did also take a period of engagement post the local elections until the beginning of June, and this feedback has also been used to develop the final version of the plan. NHS England, who are responsible for monitoring and looking after ICBs, have reviewed our plan, including their subject matter experts, and have provided excellent feedback on the plan, and that it was comprehensive and confirmed that all the content covered all the required areas, so i.e. met the guidance. The next stage is to publish the plan on the 30th of June in line with national guidance, and then that will be subject to final approval by the ICB board on the 13th of July. And then we're going to continue to deliver on the delivery of the plan. And there is a requirement for the plan to be refreshed every year. So we will need to start a refresh as soon as we finish the final version. So I think I'll stop there, Chair, and take any questions.
Do we have any questions? No, none. Right.
Jay, sorry.
Yes, please.
Yes, okay, sorry, I should have carried
But
on.
yeah, yes.
So the health and wellbeing partnership strategy, so that's the wider group that comes together that it is formed from the local authorities and the ICB to work on this system-wide partnership work that we've got across LLR, and they have produced a strategy. It's been through this health and wellbeing board a couple of times. It's in its final version now, and that will be approved by the next meeting of the health and wellbeing partnership, which is due in August.
Well, it's fair to say at this point, because I'm new to all this, and my expert advisor is slightly longer in the tooth, but not much, there are some concerns. And I think we've listened to Mrs. Fenelon, and I think we need to be aware, and we are playing catch up. I think that's only fair to say. And the one thing, so we've been really grateful for the opportunity to get involved, to be consulted. But I do think that the one thing, and your recognition of the commitment to the armed forces, and thank you very much for that, which was your amendment. But we do want to make sure that local healthcare is reviewed, and we want to focus as much as we can on place. Now, I think it may well be that the strategy board will go some way, but I think we are just voicing our concerns
Thank you, Chair. I think this strategy does reference implementation of place on a number of areas. However, the implementation plan, which will come out every year, will certainly have that focus on place. And you have the ICB's commitment to place in my role, and also the clinical leads role across the ICB, along with other members of healthcare represented on the board today. So absolutely, place is vitally important, and we're taking the overall strategy for LLR and fitting it to the needs of the Rutland population, working in conjunction with public health and health needs assessment. Thank you.
Yes, Mike.
So let's stick a bit of flesh on the bones. Take us through how that might look. So we next meet as a health and wellbeing board in October. Are we going to bring the implementation plan here and essentially mark our own homework and see how we're doing, have that discussion in terms of actions for this year, have a discussion either in the subgroups or at the board around what we might tweak then in terms of next year? What's the kind of place-based process?
I think the implementation plan is the health plan we approved last year. And I think we are bringing regular updates on that. So if we want to bring an update at the next meeting, we can do that. It's not a problem.
I mean, I think so. And I guess it's updates and enough space, then it's a bit like exception reporting for me, isn't it? If there's things that are off course, or we're saying fundamentally life's changed, it's not just to sort of receive a report and go, great, we need to find enough time there to help actually sort of resolve those issues, don't we? Yeah.
Yes, Kim.
And Chair, as my role, I'll work jointly with Health to ensure that the work that's on the vision and the plan that was approved in July of last year is brought to fruition. And they've already been working on it, but I think it's a case about communication and accessibility as well. And we reflect on that, and we'll make sure that we get more visibility on it.
I think the visibility is the key to that. So thank you very much for that. Yes, Deborah.
So just to make one further point, so I think the visibility is key, and Kim and I have had discussions about that in the last week or so. It's probably worthwhile noting that when this was discussed previously at the Health and Wellbeing Board, it was the board's view that they didn't want a separate health plan to a health and wellbeing plan. But I think we recognise from some of the discussions that have happened, it is important to draw it out. So it is very much part of the integrated health and wellbeing plan as part of that strategy. But it does exist on its own in the health plan, because sort of the role of the ICB in delivering its obligations under place means that we have a Rutland-based health plan, so we can that back to a future board on the implementation and action therewith. We do need to have a bit of a debate, I think, outside about, and what you'll notice obviously in your first board, there are updates from the subgroups of the Health and Wellbeing Board. And this also related to discuss with your predecessor, which unfortunately didn't happen. But the health plan and the actions from the subgroup cross over. So what we don't want to do is to talk about things twice or miss things out. So I would like the opportunity to discuss with you, Chair, outside the board, about how we link in the reports back from the subgroups plus the health plan, so that we're either not missing something out or talking about things more than once. Thank you, Chair.
That sounds eminently sensible as far as I'm concerned, and it will help me to get my head round how it all fits together, because at the moment it's still all a little bit vague and complicated. So thank you very much for that. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I wondered, Deborah, if we could see that documentation that brings it all together, because I'm somebody that takes on information much better when I see it printed or written down than verbally. Is that okay?
Absolutely, Janet. I mean, the board has received it last year in that form. Obviously, as we've developed the strategy, it will continue. The plan will need to continue to develop. So we will bring a refreshed version to the September board. It's September, I think, is the next board, isn't it? October, sorry, to the October board, and which will give you that opportunity.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you, Jane, and thank you for the IT department for mending our IT equipment. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment updates and timeline. So we've got various updates here. So 10A, I'm right first. So we've the Armed Forces Personnel and Family Survey report, a report from Adrian Allen and Mitch Harper. Over to you two.
Thanks, Chair. I'll go through this one. So the Appendix A of this report covers the full findings from that survey. So I won't go into any mass detail on that, but I'll just pick out some highlights. Before I do that, just some background and context. We initially decided to do this survey on the back of the purpose that the 1st Battalion Royal Anglian Regiment currently based in Cyprus will be arriving in Kendry Barracks later this year, which I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of. So we wanted to understand the health and wellbeing needs of that population in a proactive way before they arrive, alongside their families as well. Later, we decided to incorporate the personnel and families currently based in Rutland, so we could compare how those results looked with those currently here and those due to arrive. So we looked at that survey over the last couple of months. Engagement, unfortunately, wasn't as high as we expected and hoped, even though there was a lot of endeavour from the Armed Forces officer and others to promote that survey. However, it is still insightful in terms of the level that we have got back from that. But we just need to be careful to some level in terms of the interpretation of the results based on that lower sample size than we did expect. So like I say, I'm not going to go into masses of detail, but some areas that were highlighted through just before going to the demographic that responded to that. We did have the largest proportion of respondents from family of serving personnel, namely spouses and those in a relationship with the personnel themselves. So just over half of those respondents were from them. Just over half, 62%, also had dependent children. So we got a real feeling of the broader family perspective as well, not just the personnel. When we ask questions around the implications and impacts of the armed force, being in the armed forces or being in relationships or within that community, some of the things that were highlighted most in terms of negatively impacting on their lives were around mental health, poor job opportunities, and housing, getting on the housing ladder and social opportunities. That was, in terms of job opportunities, higher in the spouses. So it was 67% of family members did actually say being in the armed forces community impacted on their job opportunities. We covered physical health and mental health in two different aspects. We looked at how that compares to the general Rutland population to see how that compared, to see if there's any sort of disadvantage there. And we also looked at comparisons with the national armed forces surveys that have been completed in recent years. What we found was physical health was being described by the population slightly worse than the national figures that we had for the armed forces community. The majority of people were saying their physical health was fair at 39%, and 45% said very good or good. So it's still quite high, but it was lower than the national figures that we had. We looked at mental health, we looked at loneliness. Mental health was similar. However, loneliness was particularly high in those spouses and family members as well. Half of family members said they felt lonely often or always in our sample. And when you compare that to the national survey across the tri-service, so it's important that is not just the armed forces, it is also Navy and RAF. That was 18%, so 51% compared to 18 is quite considerably higher. We also looked at health behaviours. There was a lot coming out around physical activity, and physical activity rates were lower than the general population of Rutland. And there was a lot of needs from the local community around fitness classes, leisure centres, walking groups and other aspects of physical activity. So something potentially to look at either in terms of the level of provision or making sure that armed forces community is aware of what is available locally in Rutland. Nearly half of respondents also said they'd like support with losing weight. So something for us to potentially look at with our weight management commission services. The final point I'll just highlight is we asked questions around community, and in particular around how involved people felt they were with the wider community of Rutland, so outside of the barracks specific support. There was quite a large proportion that said they felt very involved or, sorry, very uninvolved or uninvolved. So that was just under 50% that said there was either uninvolved or very uninvolved, who currently are based in Rutland. And when they said what they would like support with in terms of accessing in Rutland, leisure service similarly was highest on that provision, followed by social groups outside of the military community, followed by social groups within the military community. Housing, employment and transport were also mentioned, with 40% plus of respondents saying those areas were particular needs that they'd like to see supported. So they are just some highlights from the report. Like I say, Appendix A does cover a lot more depth in terms of that, but like I say, interpretation, we just need to be a little bit careful in terms of the sample size that we've got in respect of the level of personnel, families that we do have at Kendrew and St George's. But I'll pause there in case there's any questions, and there's a recommendation in there around taking specific recommendations to one of the subgroups of the Health and Wellbeing Board.
Thank you very much, Mitch. Are there any questions?
First of all, Mitch, can I thank you and everybody involved for putting together the survey? Thank you very much. Really grateful. And I accept the sample size is small, but there is some rich data there. There is some useful information. There were generally no surprises. You know, it's access, dentistry, waiting lists. It's all the usual subjects came up. The one thing that did surprise me slightly, and I accept the caveat with sample size, but the number of SEND children was a little bit of concern there. And I just wonder whether children's services might want to take up and have a specific look at that in terms of making sure that those individual children are looked after accordingly. Because it seems that we are getting a little influx there of SEND children into the community.
Can we ask Dawn to reply at that point, or do you want to finish?
Could I just finish,
yeah,
and then we'll I'm happy for people to come back. In terms of things like access and waiting lists, I'm very grateful as well for the ICB getting the funds together from NHS England and introducing a single point of contact for the armed forces in Leicestershire and Rutland. And that SPOC opened yesterday. So hopefully that problems that the armed forces community have in access and waiting lists can all go forward to the single point of contact run by LPT on behalf of the ICB, and we can crack those problems that they have. I also think it's an opportunity as well for the local authority to interact with Kendrew in particular, and the Armed Forces officer has, I think now a to-do list. I think there's some things like smoking cessation, as you say, exercise classes and integration into the community. So there's a lot to go on there and a lot of useful things, and I'm very grateful for the survey. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'm going to pass on to Dawn to reply.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments, and thank you, Mitch, for this report. Just in relation to the point you made around SEND and children with special needs and disabilities. Couple of things. We're well integrated in terms of our SEND service with our armed forces colleagues, and indeed actually we've recently sent a team of children's services officers to Cyprus to identify early, alongside local schools and our armed forces officer, those children who do have additional or special educational needs. We've identified all of them. They all have school places in Rutland identified, and as well as their special needs provision is in place and ready for them for when they arrive in the UK and indeed in Rutland schools. We have, in terms of any waiting lists, I think there's a comment in the appendix around some waiting lists around dyslexia assessments. I think that that's an individual situation with an individual school. What I would say is that the service pupil premium is very, very, very small. That's paid to schools. So whilst parents talk about funding received by schools for service children, the service child pupil premium is a very small amount. So unless you're a school with a high population of service children, it doesn't go very far. So I would just make that point. But certainly what I would say is that children who are with SEND and who have serving personnel are certainly prioritised as per the Armed Forces Covenant.
Can I say thank you? We do really appreciate that, and really grateful that you've particularly picked up the point about children. In terms of the pupil premium, I've got an opportunity. We, as a committee, East Midlands committee, we put together a report for the Armed Forces Minister on an annual basis in November. I will make the point that perhaps the pupil premium could be raised.
Thank you very much. Pass on to Deborah and then to Mike afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks very much, Mitch, for the report. I think it's really worthwhile pointing out to the Health and Wellbeing Board that we are extremely lucky having Ian's post on the board, and his involvement in pursuing the single point of contact and working jointly with Public Health, the ICB. And also we're very fortunate in the expertise that LPT have on the armed forces, and they were able to take their service, which was specific in terms of mental health, and expand that to develop into a single point of contact. So the single point of contact, although it covers all of LLR, a lot of the drive and expertise has come from Rutland and come from the links via this board. And the survey, although the as we've said, the responses were slightly disappointing in number, the richness of the detail and our ability to take that baseline, and when we get the returning soldiers back to Kendrew, we can test and develop those services and make sure that they are absolutely linked into what we're doing in health and social care, and it has broader positives for the whole population of Rutland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Across to Mike, please.
Yeah, cheers. I'll echo the thanks of others, Mitch, for the report. Three questions from me, or two questions and a comment, really. Working backwards, there's mention in the report about early leavers, those who leave the armed forces with less than 4 years service. I guess the numbers are too small to do anything on that report, but I'd kind of be interested in the follow-up conversation about how do we do something specifically, because it feels like that was an important point, and maybe we lose them in the conversation about serving armed forces and veterans. The recommendations around staying healthy partnership, I think this builds on Ian's point. I mean, it feels like there are things there that we can do very quickly around leisure centre access, swimming facilities, weight management, smoking cessation. So I guess the idea is that the recommendations specifically around those things. Things like dentistry, really interested, not surprised it's cropped up, looking at Janet. If you crack that one for the armed forces, we'll just give you the job about dentistry per se. So some of those are easier said than done. And then uptake. I mean, I know you didn't get the uptake one would have wanted. Is there any feedback why that was? And I guess the thought in my mind, it was just about the channels at which people were approached. That's one thing. I would be more concerned if there was a general sense of what's it got to do with the council, nothing ever changes. So I don't know if there's any kind of comments or even in passing that might help us understand why they didn't.
I think
having been a regular for nearly 40 years, they tend to be rather isolationist, and the soldiers, sailors and airmen are fixed on going on operations and leaving the families behind, and typically you put your life on hold and your life in a box and you get on with those things, and you tend not to appreciate what's happening around with the community, and they are sometimes their own worst enemy in terms of not raising issues and not putting points together. You get a much richer answer if you ask veterans, because they are more integrated and more vocal. But regular armed forces are a little isolated.
Right, Mitch, I'll get, then Janet and then Deborah.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, I won't go through the whole list of what happens, but from speaking to the armed forces officer, I feel as though we exhausted options for promotion. He was out in Cyprus briefing families, and there was a lot that went on with that, and covering all bases of kind of communications there as well. So it might be worth another conversation with Kendra and Cyprus as well, just to try and understand why that may have been for our own learning going forward. Partly related to Cyprus, it may have been related to them being literally in Cyprus and thinking about their Cyprus world at the moment rather than their future in Rutland. But that's an assumption more than anything else. In terms of the ones leaving early, it's probably another one that we need to delve more insight into, a bigger cohort. Yeah, the ones that are currently in the armed forces, that was the smallest population that we had. So some of those saying they're potentially going to be leaving in the next few years was a really small population group. So that probably needs delving into further as well. Was there a third?
No, I think that was the 3 points. I guess the approach is one. We can pick it up offline. And I was thinking about the community-based work that you've been doing in other areas of Rutland at the moment. And I just wonder if we need to reflect on how we do needs assessment with the armed forces and think it's almost like for reasons that Ian said, it doesn't matter how many channels you use, it still seems being something else that's cost money, but there's nothing like embedding somebody within the structure who can then basically pull it out because they're part of it, not separate to it.
Yeah.
Early service leavers do create problems. It may be that they're not enjoying service life and leave early. Because they leave early, they don't get the same transition arrangements. They don't get the same grants. They leave too early to get to achieve those grants and support. And some of them are leaving for disciplinary reasons. And they may have failed a drugs test or something like that. And if that's the case, they often go into the local community on leaving the armed forces and become a problem and become homeless. And it's often a trait of young service leavers that they do have difficulties.
Move on to Janet and then Deborah, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got some questions and some comments, if you don't mind. First of all, you're concerned about the uptake. At Healthwatch, we reckon we get between 1% and 3% response rate. So I think you're pretty spot on. I think there's quite a lot of inertia. People are interviewed out, they're surveyed out, so I wouldn't be so downcast about it. My second question is where is this single point of contact? Anybody know?
So it's so it works out of LPT, so our buildings, and links in with our urgent mental health care hub. So it's a telephone resource building on one of our sites. I kind of go, the single point of contact is the ability for people to phone in and ask for help as opposed to walk through the door. So where it sits is fine. It doesn't matter where it sits as long as people are able to access the support, but we base it out of one of our offices.
And then my third question is this influx built into the demographic projections for the county that you actually produce in a later paper? And are there going to be more people coming to Kendrew, or if St George's Barracks reopens, are there going to be more personnel? And have you accounted for that in the sort of planning?
Yeah.
That's all right, I'll take that. So I'm the strategic lead for armed forces within the council. We've had some moves out of Kendrew as well as the move in from Cyprus. So at the moment, the numbers are more or less the same. The intention with the let's assume that the MOD are going to close St George's. Military working dogs who are currently there, the intention is they will move to Kendrew. So again, there won't be any difference in overall numbers. There are potentially plans for another unit to move in.
to Rutland in the future, but we're probably talking about 4 to 5 years, and bearing in mind that the MOD change their estate plans quite frequently. We may be having a very different conversation in 6 months, let alone the 4 or 5 years.
Thank you. And then my final point, because I seem to be really taken up with this and sort of really associated with it now, is the dentistry. Yes, because
no surprise.
no, but looking at the minutes at the last meeting, I have to point out that only 17% of Rutland people access NHS dentistry. And then we've got an influx of 500 plus people. And I know this is a national problem. I know that we're just sort of say, well, it's a national problem, but I don't think that's good enough. I think we really should be challenging it.
Point taken, thank you. Come over to Deborah again, please.
I was only going to respond on a previous point, but I'll just pick up Janet's point. We are concerned about the access to dentistry. In terms of the population coming back from Kendra, they'll be coming back to Kendra. There'll be a difference between serving personnel and families. The serving personnel tend to get access to dentistry via forces. Families don't get that access, and therefore you're very right to put that point out. And we are looking at dentistry and access in relation to responsibility coming down to the ICBs via a Midlands network. The other point I was just going to make around, it's probably slightly gone past, but about the survey and our access, absolutely agree with you, Mike, that we need to look at ways we can do it. But I had the very fortunate opportunity of a few weeks ago to spend a couple of days with a number of senior personnel in the armed forces across a number of different forces, and we had the discussion about this, and actually the feedback I got from them is that we're doing much more in Rutland in this respect than they've seen, and confirmed that it's quite difficult when you're a commanding officer of an operational unit. Your focus is on the operational unit, and you know, even the fact that we council sent somebody over to you know, abroad to actually try and get results for the surveys is a really positive point. So I think we still need to build on it. We still need to keep those links up, but we can take very positive feedback that we're doing all that we can locally.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
I love it when you say that. Thank you. All right, 2 quick points. One about dentistry. I think we're very aware that in terms of Rutland as a whole, there's a growing problem of lack of dentistry for children of all ages, and civilian or military. And this is a national problem, but thank God I'm not in charge of it in the national sense. But I do like, we need to look at it in terms of the Rutland sense, because you know, it's not satisfactory, and we've got to find a way of dealing with it. Second point, as somebody who lived next to a very, very large military base for many years, I learned long ago that as far as the MOD is concerned, nothing is certain until you get the very last signature on the very last piece of paper. And even then, you've got to grab it quickly from their hot, sweaty hands. All right. So we don't want to have any more trauma about St. George's Barracks, but nothing is settled.
Are there any other comments or questions? No, I'd like to draw this discussion to a close, and the motion is that the board notes the findings of the survey and approve the specific recommendations to be taken to sustain healthy partnership for consideration and determine next steps and actions, some of which we've heard as well. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any abstentions? Oh, sorry, those against. Missed that bit out. Yes. Any abstentions? No, thank you. So I'd like to confirm that the board notes the findings of the survey and approves for specific recommendations to be taken to the Staying Healthy Partnership for consideration and determine the next steps and action. Thank you very much. 10B, information and for the meeting held with the NHS England. We've now got a verbal update from Mitch following the meeting held with NHS England Dentistry.
Yeah, so this one will be a lot quicker. I mean, this conversation was in respect of action 4, which we covered earlier. So just to be clear, this wasn't necessarily a conversation around NHS dentistry access. This was just in respect of the data for Rutland. So we had a conversation around the Rutland health needs assessment on oral health, which came to the boards at the last meeting, March, I think it was. So that has been shared with them now. I've discussed the Rutland needs in respect of dentistry that was covered in that needs assessment, although it was broader related to oral health, not just dentistry. They've took that on board and took it away in whatever capacity and way they have done that. But the bigger picture is still there, is obviously an issue, and it's, I guess, up to the board whether that needs to be picked up in the future in respect of them coming back or whatever that may be. But yeah, the conversation was had about data. The Rutland needs were covered with them. So that's happened.
I'm loath to open up dentistry conversation because it may go on a very long way. But yes, Mike, please.
Straightforwardly, I guess when they presented last time round, we sat around this table and felt like we were talking about Rutland and they were telling us about Leicestershire and Rutland. So having met them and given them data, did you get any sense that they understood that we were a distinct place with our own needs and that they might even consider doing something about it? Subjective question, the answer is more than welcome.
So I'll stay diplomatic, but yes, I mean that they recognised it was a place in its own right, and the fact that there are specific needs, but the bigger needs were addressed as being the national, regional, ICB, whatever geography you want to be on around dentist recruitment, and yeah, that was the acknowledgement of it really. But they recognised Rutland as a place in its own right, but the issues are similar here than everywhere else as the bigger issues.
Are there any questions on dentistry that we've not touched on? Oh, that was dreadful. Okay. Yeah. So sorry about that. So we now have a report from Mike Sands and Hannah Blackledge on the joint strategic needs assessment chapter of the Rutland demographics and the preparation for growth. Thank you.
So quick prelude for me for members new to the Health and Wellbeing Board. Obviously, we've got a duty to publish a joint strategic needs assessment. This chapter, which should then inform commissioning decisions across Rutland. This chapter brings, I think, the first time a more comprehensive view of the results of the census 2021. And it's not Hannah, it's actually Richard Wilding who's going to do a quickie on the results of that chapter.
Thanks, Mike. Can everybody hear me? Perhaps somebody could wave a hand. Excellent. Okay. Could I just ask my colleague Andy Brown's on the call? Is it possible while I'm talking to bring him in as a panelist? I think he's just an attendee at the moment. Okay, I've got a very few slides which I'll now aim to share. Hopefully you can see that coming your way. Okay. First up really is Mike's just mentioned, this is part of a series of chapters that make up the JSNA. Aim of it is to help support the local health and wellbeing strategy and also commissioning of local services. I think you've had some chapters already and there are more to come. So this one focuses on demographic and economic information And as has just been mentioned, the census is a major source for that. So first of all, in terms of demographics, the census tells us that the population of the county is just over 41,000. It tells us that since 2011, there was a 9.8% increase in the population. Now, this is well above the national rate of increase, which was 6.6%. It's also above the East Midlands average rate of increase too. The population pyramid to the the bottom right-hand side of the chart, the bars here represent the percentage of each gender in each age group. Females are shown in orange and males are shown in blue. The small grey bars represent the England population profile. And I think what this tells us is that in the case of Rutland, we've got fewer younger people, with the exception of 15 to 19-year-olds. And we've got a lot more over 55s than the England average population profile. In terms of future projections for the population, the ONS data that they crunch and is actually due to be updated on the back of the census, but hasn't been released yet. But the estimates that we have at the moment suggest that there will be an increase of 14% to the population by 2043. So that'll take the population up to approximately 46,500 people. And that's a projected greater increase than is suggested will happen nationally. The national projection is just 8%. Now, in terms of the way the population is changing, there's actually negative natural change in the county. So when we look at births minus deaths, there's actually a shrinking population. So the change that's projected to happen is due to migration into the county from outside the county. And the chart at the top of the slide shows that the main increases are projected to be very much at the 60 plus age brackets. So you can see very large increases at the top there. Below age 60, there are one or two age brackets where we may see some small increase, and there'll be some where we do see a decline. We've talked a little bit in the meeting already about the military and veteran population. So we've got over 2,000 armed forces personnel and entitled civilians. They make up 5.1% of the population. Males outnumber females in that group, and that's reflected in the population pyramid.
Yeah.
Hi, shall I crack on?
Richard, we're back on, Richard. Thank you. Will you please continue?
Excellent, thank you. Just to finish up really on the military veterans issue, the census tells us that 6.9% of the population of the county had previously served in the UK Armed Forces, and that's nearly double the England and Wales figure, which is 3.8%. So really the sort of military veteran side of things, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, it's a significant chunk of the county population. The next slide brings in some of the messages about deprivation. The indices of deprivation are based on 39 indicators that are used to create the themes that are shown down the left-hand side of the chart on the slide. Deprivation tends to be talked about in relative terms compared to the rest of the country. And using the index of multiple deprivation overall measure, Rutland is ranked 303rd out of 317 local authorities for multiple deprivation, where 1 is the most deprived and 317 is the least deprived. So a ranking of 303 suggests that Rutland isn't a deprived county overall. This isn't to say, though, that there's no deprivation in the county, and the domain level data that we've got suggests that there are definite pockets of deprivation against certain themes. So the chart here, which may be slightly tricky to read, it divides the population by IMD domains down the left-hand side, which are reasonably self-explanatory, and across the base are national deciles. So placed under the 10th decile on the right is the Rutland population that would fall into the least deprived 10th or decile, or 10% of the national population. So quite chunks of the Rutland population fall within that least deprived decile. The chart that we've got here does suggest that for the domain called barriers to housing and services, around 10,000 people in the county are in the most deprived 2 deciles for that domain. And this covers both physical proximity to services as well as affordability and homelessness issues. So you can imagine that given the rural character of the county, the physical proximity will be an issue, and that'll be part of the reason why there are people in that domain there. Below that, at the bottom of the chart, 2,700 people approximately are estimated to fall into the most deprived 2 deciles for living environment. And the following slide picks that theme up around living environment, and it maps the neighbourhoods that are more deprived. They're shown in purple under the living environment indoors subdomain. And this domain, it covers the quality of housing, so things like lack of central heating or not meeting the decent home standard. And this is likely to be more relevant to public health and health planning than some of those other deprivation domains. So you can see here that there are some green coloured areas that have got, they're ranked as being not very deprived. All of the neighbourhoods in the country are ranked from 0 to around 32,000. So the deeper the purple suggests there's more of an issue in terms of this theme. Moving on to pick out a few issues around life expectancy and deaths. Life expectancy at birth in Rutland is the highest of all 152 upper tier local authorities for males. It's 4th for females. The figures are on the slide there. In terms of healthy life expectancy at birth, Rutland is very high. It's the highest for males. It actually comes in at 27th for females. So some quite interesting stats there in terms of life expectancy. Looking at deaths, a couple of points to pick out. Under 75 mortality rates from all causes and from causes considered preventable are significantly lower than the national averages. Mortality rates from cardiovascular disease and respiratory disease, they're better than national averages too. We're seeing similar rates of death from circulatory disease and cancer. And one point which I have highlighted on the slide there, we've got a lower proportion of deaths in hospital or hospice than nationally, and a higher proportion either at home or in care homes. I've included a few slides around the legally defined protected characteristics. This data comes mainly from the census. It does show that within the county, 5.2% of the population comes from a non-white background or an ethnic minority background. Having said that, within the white group, there is 2.9% there that are from a white other background. So there'll be other European backgrounds. That represents about 1,200 people. So they're a group that are worth bearing in mind. In terms of religion, we've seen a shift reflecting the national shift away from people declaring a religion of Christian, which is down quite significantly from 2011, and a corresponding increase in people saying that they have no religion. Moving down the slide, sexual orientation was a question on the census for the first time. It was a voluntary question, and in Rutland, 2.1% of the adult population identified as LGB+. This is slightly lower than the 3% national result. And lastly, one point of interest on here, the county's seen a very high rate of sponsorship of Ukrainians with 143 arrivals as of recent data. And that does place Rutland, I think, in the top 10% of local authorities on a sort of rate per head of receiving Ukrainians. So quite a positive point there for the area. Housing and homelessness. Some key points here. The percentage of households that own their own home rose slightly since the last census, whereas East Midlands wide and nationally, we've seen a fall in home ownership. Private renting also increased. I mean, that does reflect a national trend. The chart on this slide shows changes in household composition between the last 2 censuses. At the top of the chart, you can see there's been an increase in single older person households. We've had a decrease in households with dependent children, I think reflecting the ageing of the population there. There has been a detailed strategic housing market assessment back in 2019. That's a periodic event for all local areas, so I won't go into that in detail. Safe to say that it did recommend looking to increase the supply of accessible and adaptable dwellings and dedicated older persons housing. You'll no doubt be aware average house prices are high in the county. So in January, average house price of 402,000, which is well above the England average of 310,000. And this really feeds into affordability being an issue. So an affordability ratio for Rutland quoted as 9. So that's a multiple of average earnings that is required to purchase a house, which is significantly higher than the East Midlands figure of just over 7. Looking at employment and skills, the county's got relatively low levels of people claiming out of work benefits, so just 1.7% of people in that group, accounting for 401 people at recent data. A further claimant rate of 746 claiming universal credit as a result of low wages. So that's worth bearing in mind too. Residents of the county are more likely to work in managerial and professional occupations than other East Midlands residents. Pay for people living in Rutland is higher than East Midlands local authorities average and the England average. Having said that, when we look at earnings by workplace, Rutland's earnings are actually the lowest of East Midlands upper tier authorities. So I think quite a contrast there between people who live in the county but perhaps work outside and are earning above average amounts of money, and lower pay for people who work within the county. It's a relatively well qualified county with a relatively high percentage of people holding level 4 or degree level qualifications. The final slide here picks up some general points about the economy. Earlier this year, a document was produced for the county setting out some economic strategy insights. This did point out that productivity was relatively low and the economy was in the bottom 10 of the UK local authorities for economic growth over the last 10 years or 10 years pre-COVID. Now, there's a range of factors that could explain this, and I've put a few examples up there on the slide. The county's got a relatively small share of high productivity service sectors, things like financial, insurance services, IT, communication services. Potentially there could be issues around labour supply, so the population is growing. There are more older residents who are perhaps less likely to be providing a pool of labour for growth. And I think the last point picked up from the previous slide, really, higher resident wages suggests that many of the higher skilled workers may be working outside the county. So I'll pause there. Very happy to sort of take any questions or comments or hear suggestions about implications for health and wellbeing strategy planning from this.
Okay. Oh, hang on. Ray, Mike, Janet. Okay, we've got 3 people asking to comment. So we'll turn to Councillor Payne to start with.
Thank you very much. I notice on the economy and productivity, you haven't specified agriculture as such. And yet, when you had the map up earlier about deprivation, it's notable that most of the purple areas were in the rural parts of the county. And I wonder if there's a correlation between the fall of productivity in the agricultural sector and what your map was showing. Can you draw any conclusions to that?
It's hard to say. It might be something I need to take away, but I do know that in the more detailed report that you've got, employment levels in agriculture, forestry and fishing, which is one of the sort of industry groupings, is really quite low. I take the point that it's a large, largely rural county, but actually the share of employment that's in that as an industry is quite low. So with the data that we've looked at, it's a little bit hard to draw firm conclusions. but I can take that away and have a bit more of a look into it.
I'd appreciate that because, you know, we are a very rural county and agriculture traditionally would have been one of the bedrock industries in the county, along with quarrying and the like. And I can't help feeling there's a correlation between low growth and the fact that the agricultural sector has probably declined somewhat.
I think it's probably fair to say that when we look nationally at the sectors of the economy that tend to drive growth, agriculture probably isn't one of those industries. So that there may be that link that we can draw.
Thank you. Mike, would like to ask you a question?
Yeah, thank you. A number of comments. Thanks, Richard. There's an awful lot in there that we do need to make certain gets out to the subgroups of the Health and Wellbeing Board and indeed across the broader council and partners. Sundry comments, the figures on where people die. I'm kind of thinking it chimes with the end of life strategic joint strategic needs assessment chapter, where I think within Rutland we found there was a lesser percentage died in a hospice, but that was because due to the lack of hospice provision. So there's probably good news in there around more people in Rutland dying at home, I think we said, but I suppose it's just, there is a check for me about making certain that wherever people die, they are properly supported. So I guess we need to add that to the end of life JSNA chapter. The deprivation stats were fascinating. I was fully expecting Rutland, as you'd expected, to show up relatively more poorly around access to services. But the point about accommodation was not one that I was aware of. And I think that's another one which wasn't in sort of, you know, Uppingham and Oakham, it was in the more rural areas of Rutland. So there's certainly something there, I think, to pick up on housing standards. And then generally, I thought the real big take home was that first slide around population growth. So there's a lot of detail in there. But that sort of up 9.9% in 10 years is really quite pronounced. And I was looking at the population pyramid on that first slide on the right-hand side. And again, you know, I laughingly call it a population pyramid because in the old days there was that, you know, ever diminishing number of older people as you get older. But that figure, that, you know, the shape of it for Rutland now really is just a sort of cylinder, basically, isn't it? And I was trying to work out on the slide, there were some thin vertical lines for each age band. And I couldn't work out if that was a percentage in Rutland, the last census, or whether it was in comparison with the national figures. Because, I mean, either way, it showed to me a fairly stark decrease comparatively in Rutland in the younger age groups, with the exception of 15 to 19, I think. And they're more in the older groups. So, I mean, again, fascinating, but just reflecting on kind of the big issue is population growth and where it is.
Just to pick up, the thin lines were the national position. So that's the England position. So it was comparing how Rutland's population matches up to the national.
Right, pass on to Janet now, please.
Yeah, thank you. One of the things, I don't know whether the chapter is a draft chapter or not, but I think it would be more understandable for people if healthy life expectancy is actually defined for people, you know, for the lay reader. That's just a suggestion. And my second comment is actually looking at the percentage of people that are living with alone, or a single parent living alone with children. And when you add those three percentages up, the two top ones on that scale, and then the single parent with children, it's actually 35% of Rutland people adults are living alone. Now that for me throws up several questions. One is caring responsibilities. Who cares for these single people if they need it? Who cares for the children of a single parent if the single parent can't care for any reason? So there's quite a lot of there, I think, that needs further sort of exploration. And my other thinking is that loneliness is an awful, awful feeling. You can be lonely in a crowd, but you can be even more lonely on your own in a crowd. And it has been suggested it's linked to dementia. So I think there's probably a lesson to take, that we should be actually addressing the needs of people that are living alone. So that's open.
Any comments back? Sorry.
I was going to say we can, I mean, it is a final draft for agreement, but we can certainly slip in a better explanation of healthy life expectancy, and we can probably draw out that issue about the numbers of people living alone and highlight that a little bit more.
Just picking up on the demographics with regards to the armed forces community. From MOD data, Rutland is the third highest for regular forces in the country. There's only Wiltshire and Portsmouth are higher in terms of density of regular armed forces. And on the veterans at 6.9%, we're in the top 10. So both regular forces and veterans were very well represented. And of course, the point that Karen made is quite right. We could see an increase in the future with regular forces, with another unit moving in the next 5 years.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, thank you very much.
Thanks for that. I thought really helpful. I thought just a point to think for us about the JSNA is refreshing chapter by chapter is a really helpful way of getting us to keep coming back to the JSNA. So historically, we would have looked at it once, left it alone for a couple of years, come back and looked at it again. Actually, the refresh chapter by chapter keeps it alive, brings it there and gets us to keep thinking about it. So I think that's a really helpful bit. The other bit that I'd say this reminds us of that we can use and take forward is to think, what's it telling us about our demography and the potential community assets we've got with older people, support, ways of working, and thinking how that feeds into the levelling up bid and the way of working about how we make more use of community assets and support people. So it's helpful for us to think about it in that context as we take that forward as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Any other comments? Oh, yes. Hang on, one more. Who was there? Karen? Go on, you can go first, Karen.
Sorry, it was just a point of information. The local housing market needs assessment is in the process of being updated at the moment. That's nearly complete. So actually that would be a good opportunity to feed that in, because that would be obviously more up-to-date data and information.
Another chapter.
Chair, normally I restrict my comments to the armed forces, but as a Rutlander born and bred and coming from farming stock myself, there are rural poor in Rutland, and it's hidden by the affluence.
Yeah. I'll be brief, just to point out that we picked up obviously in some of the comments and in the report about carers, and there's an LLR carers strategy, and we're seeing how that links to Rutland hospice care, and comment about hospice care. People dying in hospices is low. We need to determine whether that's a choice issue or an access issue. We talked about the palliative care bed being available in Rutland Memorial Hospital. Loros is obviously another aspect, and there is another hospice called Fort Paul that we're looking at capacity in, but obviously there's an overall access issue to hospice beds in total. And one last point, I think there was a comment made around Ukraine and links to refugees. The Rutland PCN do employ a Ukrainian, they employ a Ukrainian doctor who's working with the PCN around some of that communication strategy and picking up some of the needs of the Ukrainian population.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Are there any other comments from this? No. That should help on my left. So I'd like to draw this discussion to a close. The motion that the board approves Rutland's demographic and growth needs assessment and asks the relevant board subgroups to consider the recent demographic changes and trends and how these can be taken into account in future service plans and commissioning targets. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Thank you very much. Anyone against? Any abstentions? No. So I would like to confirm that the board approves Rutland's demographic and growth needs assessment and as the relevant board subgroups and consider the recent demographic changes and trends and how these can be taken into account in future service plans and commissioning strategies. Thank you. Right, moving on to Catherine again. So 11, joint health and wellbeing strategy. So the report from Catherine Willison, please. Over to you, Catherine.
Thank you. A report on the joint health and wellbeing strategy. So I'm bringing this report today to update the board on progress of the delivery plan and also highlight elements of the Rutland outcome report. I have recorded a few highlights from the delivery plan, which you can see obviously in the report. Just highlight the X-ray machine is now functioning at the Rutland Memorial Hospital. So hopefully feels like good news for everybody. What I want to do going forward as part of this report is focus on maybe a case study, so something meaningful for people. So I wanted to just draw attention to the Wellbeing Peer Support Group at item number 3. So this group has been developed by Alex from the RISE team alongside Dr. Cora, who's lead mental health GP for Rutland. Having identified gap in provision for promoting wellbeing and confidence of people with mental health issues in Rutland, they developed this group. The aim is to enable people to meet with others with similar experiences, share ways in which they can develop their lives in a meaningful way, and reduce the impact of challenging experiences. So there was a group that met for 6 weeks at Peppers. They've had opportunities to develop friendships. Second group met at the Refill Cafe. And what I wanted to do was just read out a few of the statements of feedback from the people who've been using these groups. So it includes a statement, it's been very helpful for me. I've learned a lot of new coping strategies, which I'll implement into my daily life. Being in a group is really good, as it's great to share each other's experiences and learn from each other. And I take away new friendships, new strategies to cope, and the wonderful feeling I'm not alone. So yeah, wanted to share that as a great piece of work that's being progressed through the health and wellbeing strategy. A couple of notes for next steps. I'm in the middle of formulating a 12-month annual review of the delivery plan. So I've got sessions with the leads over July to review the last 12 months and consider what might be achieved within the next 12 months. So I'll share that when it's completed. And just to focus on the communication and engagement plan, I have got another report, but I just wanted to mention it here. We kind of incorporated it into this strategy, those communication engagement plan. The purpose is to try and help facilitate the delivery of the strategy by, promoting comms, information, including pre-poor co-production elements. And a piece of good news here is that 2 experts by experience have now been identified, and they will support with consultation around service developments, potentially hoping to have them on interview panels and things like that as part of the co-production work. The outcome summary report, I have included a few indicators where Rutland is performing well and a few where it's performing not so well. They are there for people to consider if they wish. I just wanted to say though, within priority 2 and 7, so I'm on 5.7 now. Within priority 2 and 7.1, it says Rutland isn't performing well. on the indicator for self-reported well-being of people with a high anxiety score. So the groups that I've just mentioned, those well-being groups, we hope that that will, contribute to lessening people's anxiety, improving their confidence, and also work underway as part of the mental health neighbourhood strategy is focusing very much on well-being anxiety. And also the RISE team in Rutland, it's a real focus on prevention work and supporting people with their skills and through anxiety, those kind of challenges. That's it.
Okay, so where are we now? So any questions on this paper? Comments, questions, nothing? Oh, got away with that one. Nothing, okay. So I'd like to draw this discussion to a close, or this presentation. The motion is that the board notes the further development of the JHWS delivery plan and notes the latest Rutland outcomes report. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Any abstentions? I'd like to confirm that the board notes the further development of the JHWS delivery plan and notes the latest Rutland outcomes report. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, so back to you again, Catherine. Falls data.
Thank you. So this is to do with data regarding hip fractures following falls, and we've discussed it at recent board meetings. What we've felt within our services in Rutland, well, the Rutland County Council services, is that the public health data accessed via fingertips, which is a electronic way of looking into public health data. Dashboard, thank you.
Just always say dashboard.
It's dashboard. Yeah, so from that data, they've recorded that there were 55 hip fractures in Rutland with residents 65 plus, and that data is from March 21 to March 22, which works out approximately 5 hip fractures per month. From our anecdotal evidence within Rutland County Council services, it felt like that was too high. So what we wanted to do was collate some data from within our services. So we've done this over the last 10 weeks, and it's data from safeguarding team, from therapy services, and from the hospital integration team. So it's all Rutland County Council. And what we found is there have been 5 hip fractures over the last 10 weeks. So that is obviously lower than the public health fingertips data. Yes, it is. We just finished it. But yes, yeah. The public health data is older. Exactly. So it either indicates an improvement, it's only 10 weeks, indicates possible improvement, or it indicates an anomaly within the data sets. There is a possible element that falls occurring within hospitals leading to hip fractures is included in the public health data. So my request is that we continue gathering this data for another 6 months, so we've got a more robust set of data, and in the meantime converse with public health colleagues and bring a better picture back to the board in 6 months' time when we've had a chance to gather more data.
Yes, go on, public health.
I guess for me, fingertips data is fingertips data, so it's national, so there's nothing much that we can do to change it, nor do I think I'd want to, because even if it does include hip fractures within hospital, they are hip fractures to Rutland residents. So I suspect the answer is I don't think it's an anomaly in data. where the additional data picks in as it helps us a little bit like conversation about inequalities and the demographic bit, if it helps us to unpick a little bit more what's going on underneath the figures, and then we can start saying, actually, within these figures, there are X number are happening at home and these people should have had an intervention or whatever, then that's probably the extra. So I don't want to get into a kind of like debate about which data source is more accurate, not least of which because we'll spend a lot of time and then lose. But I think it's an addition to the fingertips data rather than replacing it, but it is useful.
Yeah, thank you. That's really helpful. I think it caused some concern because it just seemed so much higher than what people were seeing, practicing day to day operationally. But yeah, another 6 months will give us the opportunity to look more at pathways and see what's happened leading up to somebody's fall and what's happened after that fall. So yeah, absolutely, we're hoping to get more context and understanding around it as well. Yeah.
Janet, please.
Yes, I was the one that raised the question initially, as I asked what percentage of falls were happening in care homes and what percentage of falls were, or how many falls are happening in the domestic home, because it concerned me at that time that a lot of resource was being put into care homes, quite rightly, but were we not looking at the other places of falls? I don't think, with all due respect, I think just looking at hip fractures doesn't answer that question, because a lot of people fall and don't fracture their hips, but will suffer as a result of actually lying on the floor at home for hours. They'll get pressure sores, they'll get pneumonia, they'll get head injuries, etc. So I feel that the data, along with what's sitting under it, I think there's a lot more there to actually look at, with all due respect, if you don't mind me saying.
Yes, keep going.
I was just thinking you might want to just wait, because it's very similar. The data alone tells us something, but actually we need to understand what else is going on and compare that with our own services as well and how we're responding. So I think, even though that fingertips data stood at one point, we're now looking at our current situation. What does that look like? What does it tell us? And really compare that with our services and what do they look like, because we think they're good, but we need evidence that they're good, don't we, as well?
Yeah.
Can I comment? Am I allowed to comment? Is there any way of us confirming a more accurate source of information, be it falls or hip fractures in or out of hospital? Is there any other coded activity that we could collect in order to compare? No, sorry, I just had
I think this is where we are relying on the public health fingertips data, but there's a plethora of falls prevention work happening in Rutland, led by therapy services, and more recently it's been more linked more closely with the DHU falls response service. So we can certainly look at percentages of falls at home compared to in their own home. The principal OTs, it's one of their main areas of work in Rutland County Council. So I can potentially bring something back. Maybe we could, I don't know if it's worth having a conversation outside of here to see specifically what would be helpful. And then we can certainly bring something back that helps with that information next time, potentially.
That sounds very useful. Thank you very much. Deborah.
So 2 things in relation to that. There's a relatively low uptake for the DHU falls survey. Yes. So that's in contrary to actually thinking that we've got high incidence. So that in itself is interesting and needs exploring further. We've got a new provider at the moment for our minor injuries unit, which actually is DHU and links into that fall service. They're starting to collect some more data of attendance at the minor injuries unit, and certainly there's been an increased presentation of people over 70 to the minor injuries unit, not necessarily for falls though. We need to get behind the data. If we are going to bring this back, I suggest that we're not likely to have something ready for October, because I think just in terms of the numbers and the amount of work that we'll need to do, but we'll explore it as part of the work of the IDG and joint work between Catherine, Kim and myself, and we will feed back, have it potentially as a possible agenda item in October, but if not to the December meeting. Was it January? I get confused which days. Yeah.
Thank you, David. And that's just what I was going to say. Actually, it'd be really good if we could gather, because what Catherine did was highlighted some of the work that the teams are doing around falls, but there's so much, and they will have done it. It's done specific work on care homes, especially after COVID, when people had deteriorated. And they were able to get back in, and also around the force protests in the community. So it might be interesting to bring this back as a bigger agenda item, so we can say showcase, but sort of show what we are doing as an authority and health together, and how effective it's been.
And I think what you're saying there, and I would agree, is that it's probably that's hidden. There's a lot more that, and the more you delve, the more you'll want longer than October, because I think it's probably a rabbit hole with lots of other rabbit holes.
And building on it, I suppose listening to the conversation, just being a little wary. What I think we as a board need to understand is, are we providing and do we have a good range of services for people to live well and support them? I'm slightly nervous that the rabbit hole we're about to go down is how perfect can we get the data? How perfect we can get the data doesn't necessarily help us answer the question of, have we got the right range of services? Are we all working together? So I think that we need to find a balance about how perfect do we make it versus actually what we're trying to do is make sure we've got a whole range of services.
Hey, Mike. We're now moving on to the health and wellbeing communication and engagement plan. And guess what? It's Catherine again.
Thank you. Yes, so I've brought this paper today to update the board on the progress of the communication and engagement plan. Obviously, I mentioned it before in an earlier report. The plan was developed to support the role of the Health and Wellbeing Board and delivery of the strategy, as I've mentioned. So which I talked about at previous board meeting was the plan, awaiting sign-off, approval, finalisation from the stakeholders. And so I've been able to say today that the plan has been finalised by stakeholders. My apologies for not sending the list of stakeholders via email prior to the meeting. It's an appendix. It's Appendix A in this paper, which is page 190. That gives you a list of all the people who have been prior to me, but involved in developing the plan and agreeing it. What was recommended was having a summary of the plan to make it more accessible for both professionals, members of the public, anybody. So we have developed the summary, which is on page 191 of the papers. So it's a very brightly coloured summary of the plan, which hopefully people will find useful, such as focuses on the purpose of the plan, the objectives, and a little bit of explanation on the integrated care system, a focus on the 7 areas of the health and wellbeing strategy, and then a little bit on comms and engagements and co-production models at the end. You'll also find at the end of the paper the latest delivery plan, which is being updated on a regular basis. So I wanted to share that with everybody and let people know that the stakeholders had finalised the plan.
Are there any questions?
Yeah, thanks for this. Just a couple of questions. I just wanted to clarify how children and young people have been involved in this, and whether anybody from Children's Services have been involved. I can see a couple of names that I recognise, but they have joint. So Aaron Chapman, I know, is named in one of the appendix, but I just wondered whether he's got more than one role in RCC, and I just wondered in which capacity he'd been engaged, whether that was from a children's perspective. But I can't see any children's services other than that one name. I can't see any children's services staff.
That's the one who's been involved.
So we haven't had children's services represented, because that's Aaron wouldn't be able to represent children's services.
So that's something that hasn't been, this is been brought forward from previous stakeholders. So no, that I can only say that people on the system have been involved.
So I just wondered, in terms of future then, in terms of the communication and engagement plan for Rutland, how children, what the plan is to involve children and young people, for example, the youth council or, you know, children's services officers.
Deborah, would you like to comment, please?
You raise a really good point, and I'm speaking on behalf of Catherine with having a discussion, but we'd welcome your input, Dawn. So I think we'd take the advice of the children's subgroup about input into that, the communication strategy, and who you would want to get involved, and take it to the next stage.
Are you asking the children and young people's partnership to engage? When you talk about a children's subgroup, I'm not sure who you're referring to.
Apologies, partnership, yes, but both to engage, but also to advise some groups to engage with. I mean, this strategy is on behalf of the Health and Wellbeing Board, so we all have an input into it, and I suppose we need to make sure that everybody gets that opportunity.
Yeah, this is the delivery of the plan is still quite in early stages. So absolutely having some children's input would be excellent. So yes, any if somebody wants to volunteer or.
Okay, I'll give you some names of people to engage with. It won't be a single person. We have a number of youth. Well, we have a youth council, we have a disabled youth forum, we have a children care council, we have a care experience forum. So there's lots of different formal forums that you'll be able to engage with, as well as more broadly.
Thanks.
I suppose it's more about what do you want them to engage with, and being clear about that, rather. So I think that's probably what we need to think about, probably as officers first.
Very good point, Dawn, and this links to the action that I didn't manage to speak to Sam about, which I wanted to speak to you, Diane, about, because we've got, and I'll bring it up here so that the board are aware. We've got the Health and Wellbeing Board. We've got some subgroups. The subgroups have grown over the last year, but our health and wellbeing strategy split into the life courses, and the action plans that sit with it were originally reported through the IDG, the Integrated Delivery Group, of which Kim and I jointly chair. I don't think that's the right way for us to do it, because then that's one of the reasons actually that we probably not got this link in with children's as we should have done, because that nobody from children's comes to that subgroup meeting because you've got your own subgroup meeting. So it'll probably be really good if Dawn, Kim, Dan and myself sit down and discuss how that works through.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. We do need to take this offline because the Children and Young People's Partnership is not technically a subgroup of the Health and Wellbeing Board. There's a dotted line. It's a formally constituted partnership board in its own right that has a dotted line into this board, but it's not a formal subgroup in the same way the IDG is. So, and I think that's where, so it has a much broad, so in the Children and Young People's Partnership, their priorities have cut across all needs of children and young people in Rutland, not just a focus on health and well-being. And I think this is where there's a kind of things are falling down a little bit. So I think having an offline kind of meeting to kind of really
a possible disconnect. But I think also, as I said earlier, because I'm new to this, I've been asking all those questions of how it all fits together. And I would be welcome the opportunity to see if there's a better way of making sure that everybody's views, not for the sake of meetings, but that everybody's views are taken into consideration. And particularly if we're going to come up with a communications plan, we need to make sure that everybody's involved, I think. So I take your point.
I don't pick it up on the recording. Some other people can't hear.
Yeah, I would. Do we need to review this before it's brought back for finalisation? Would that be a fair comment? I'm not sure if I can do that, but I'm trying. Catherine, what do you think?
If Dawn wants some children's input into it, then it's important that we have that, I think. So
it's probably essential, isn't it? There's a children's voice there as well.
It isn't new. It was brought a year ago.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is
it's unfortunate that it's not been
picked up before. Yeah. So I think we need to recognise that we've missed the space there.
Yeah. So absolutely, I think it's more important to wait and have the right input.
Just a point, it has been raised. I have raised the voice of children and young people consistently over the last 12 months. So just for a point of accuracy, it isn't a case that it hasn't been raised previously.
We will take that very firmly on board, Dawn. Anybody else wants to comment? So I think we will leave that. We will shelve is the wrong word. We'll put that on one side and we'll come back to it to discuss it. And then we'll come up with a plan that involves everybody, and that we recognise your voice on behalf of children. So if that's all right with everybody, we're shelving it. Does everyone agree that we will put that? Yes, thank you. Everyone agree that we need to put children at the forefront? Definitely. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, Catherine. There's one more at the bottom of the page. The Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board Annual Report 2022-23 being presented by Catherine Willison again. Thank you, Catherine.
Yes, thank you. You'll find the report in the packs, quite a few pages. We did this well because we ought to be doing an annual report of the Health and Wellbeing Board, but it was requested by the previous director and portfolio holder to produce it, partly to celebrate the successes of the previous 12 months, everything that the partners, officers, practitioners have managed to deliver in the last 12 months. It is also part of the communication engagement plan to raise the profile of the Health and Wellbeing Board. So to potentially have a brochure type report may assist with that, sharing it in the community. The next steps is to consider how we do upon agreement. We'll have to cover that bit, but if it is agreed, think about how we're going to share that, distribute it, websites, etc. So I've brought it for comments, any concerns, and also thank you very much. Lots of people contributed to that, so it's an absolutely collaborative joint piece of work.
So do we have? Yes, we have. Thank you very much, Jan.
Thank you. I liked the report. I thought it was really good, but could I just point out on page 2000, feels like 204, please. Health, ageing and living well with ill health priority. And you've got in it, the Joy platform was introduced in September 2023.
That's not right, is it?
No, I also wondered, because you put that it's a public facing platform, I wondered whether you could put the link in there, because I would have liked to have actually had a look at it.
Yeah, great idea. Yes, we'll do
Thank
that.
you.
Great idea. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mike.
Can I be really, really picky because one of my bugbears is forward, it's not forward. It really gets me go every time.
Sorry, what's that?
It's Sam Harvey's forward is forward. It's forward. That and 2 C's and 2 M's in accommodation, they drive you nuts. That's why I can't let it go.
We'll get that altered. That is vital.
Are you volunteering to proofread everything now?
Well, I do as a matter of course. I'm sure we all do. Yeah.
Motion is that the board notes the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board Annual Report 2022-23, which had been approved by my predecessor Samantha Harvey and Kim Sorsky, Strategic Director of Adult Services and Health. Are we in favour with a few amendments of spelling, etc., for it to go? All those in favour? Yes. Anyone against? No. Any abstentions? No. So I would like to confirm that the board notes the Rutland Health and Wellbeing Board Annual Report 2022-23 approved by us, right, by Councillor Diane Ellison and Kim Sorsky, amongst others. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I therefore ask for if people don't mind contacting me and suggest where we place this plan, I will talk to our RCC communications team about it, but any suggestions would be gratefully received.
I'm sure that Tracy will be happy to put it on the Health Watch Rutland website for you.
Excellent.
I'll say that. I'm 99% sure.
Thank you.
Yes, comment. Notes to receive report 97/2023 from Mayor Patel, Head of Integration and Transformation, Leicestershire and Rutland Integrated Care Board. We now have a report from Mayor, and is he hopefully there? Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all. I'm going to take the paper as read. So what I'll do, I will summarise the paper and we'll take any questions at the end. Thank you so much. So the paper sets out the approach the ICB took in terms of developing the primary care strategy. Now, we have got the assurance I wanted to ensure the board has, the Health and Wellbeing Board has here, is that throughout the development of the strategy, all of our 3 places, that being Rutland City and Leicestershire County, will absolutely incorporate their development of their individual health and wellbeing board plans, and the delivery plan were absolutely incorporated within the development of primary care strategy. The strategy currently is an agile document, just so that we're aware, because of the new commissioning arrangement that is coming the ICB way, that is the pharmaceutical contract, dental contract and optometric contract. So that the end of this year, we will need to review the strategy. So that's the caveat, because currently there is a heavy focus on general practices when we refer to primary care. Now, in order to sort of ensure that we are developing the primary care strategy, which is right and fit for purpose, you will note within the paper a range of national survey, patient feedback, the insight from were taken on board to ensure that the priorities that we currently identify within the primary care that also supports the system challenges were absolutely the right ones. Now, we have had the opportunity to road test that on occasions with this range of stakeholders, that being our Health Watch, PPG forums, and we've had some fantastic feedback and support actually in terms of shaping the strategy. And what it means is around, you will note within the actual strategy that there are themes, there are cross-cutting themes, the priorities, and how the 3 approach we will implement across the life of this strategy. Again, with the caveat that we will need to refresh this as we take on the additional commissioning arrangements of pods, which is what we're calling it. So in terms of the overview, again, it's around making sure that the collaborative approach that we have in place as a system, working in partnership with local authority, is very much embedded within the strategy. Then how we are taking those sort of steps forward. Any national changes, local changes, any emerging themes that we need to sort of incorporate. I think the strategy has been well developed in it to be able to sort of take that on board. One of the example is that it very much talks about access. Now, the work that we started doing in terms of developing the strategy and understanding the access absolutely is a priority, was confirmed again nationally by developing a national primary care access recovery plan. So the assurance it gave me was that we are absolutely on the right track to ensure that we are identifying how we will address those variations, how we will, what opportunities we have as a system to be able to ensure that the prevention agenda, the bringing care closer to home agenda, and the needs of the people are absolutely met regardless of where they live within each of our places across LLR. And in terms of, I think there is also a list of the stakeholders that we've engaged as well. And I suppose the next steps are that we will make sure that we will be reviewing this strategy in due course, as well as ensure that it's published and in a way that anybody can understand what is the primary care is setting out to do for me. So I think that's the next step. So we'll be working with our comms and engagement team to ensure that this is not just a 20-25 page document that sits on the shelf, but very much a live live piece of work that everybody can understand. I think I'll leave it at that, if that's okay, but happy to take any comments, feedback. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Janet, as usual.
Yeah, thank you. I really admire the ambition. I am sceptical about the delivery. I've found over the last quite a few years since I've been involved with Health Watch that this isn't the first sort of delivery plan I've seen for primary care. It's not the first recovery plan or anything. And people's lived experiences differs very much from the words on the presentation. And I would urge absolute caution about engaging yet again on a set of promises which people's lived experiences are, as they tell us, are not being delivered. I know the ambition is there. I know that there's a lot of work gone into it, because I sit there, you know, but the public are very concerned that they're not getting at the access that they need.
Deborah.
Janet, your points are well made. I think it is worthwhile stating there's a difference between comparator of number of appointments per population, of which Rutland does very well. So our primary care practices, GP practices, perform much higher than the required 75 appointments per 1,000 population. However, there is a recognition, because of the rurality of Rutland, the demand on primary care services from Rutland is higher than it would be elsewhere. So I think that the ambitions that are in the strategy are absolutely the right thing to do, and we have a joint responsibility, both as the Health and Wellbeing Board and particularly within the ICB, to ensure that we translate those ambitions into a plan and report on that plan's delivery. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, thank you. I think just wanted to reflect, I was sat in a meeting with Sarah last Friday or Friday before, and Andy Williams, Chief Exec of the ICB, and the ICB Medical Director was presenting an update around the primary care strategy and the way of working. I think what was absolutely clear was the commitment from, if you want, the lead GP across the whole of LLR, that primary care will improve, that will deliver changes, ways of working through. And we were going through the detail of how do we end the 8 o'clock phone challenge, the changes of the ways of working. So the scale of the ambition is large, in that it's large number of organisations needing to change different practices to deliver its work. But my confidence that people want to take it forward and want to tackle it is quite high. There was a real commitment to saying, let's make this change, let's deliver it, which I think is important for us. If you want to get behind and go, right, let's make this change happen, let's support it, drive it forward, because it will make a really big difference and outcome, probably for us all individually, but also for all our communities and population.
Mike.
It's delivery as well, but it's slightly different, which is shouldn't be that hard. I mean, we've got what, 4 practices. That's about right. So there is a bit, I'm looking at Deborah, because it's almost like the obvious question is, how do we Rutlandize it? And for all the strategy and the governance kind of stuff, I'm thinking that's just about sitting down with the 4 practices and addressing workforce issues, development issues, co-location of services, pathways, etc., all of which you'll be onto. So need an implementation plan. Yeah, but you know, don't know. Is it really that difficult just to sit down in a room and go, right, what's your issues? Let's develop primary care for Rutland, I guess.
Right, Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, and I actually agree with everything. But the problem is, people in the county, their patience is exhausted. We can't have more aspirations. We need to see delivery. You know, people are tired of hearing the same very well-intentioned, very well-meaning platitudes. You know, it should not be beyond our wit in a small county like this, where everybody knows each other. You know, if we can't get this right, then you might wonder how larger areas are ever going to get it right. So I think it's beholden on us to show that it can be done and to get on with it.
Any other comments? Oh yeah, Janet.
I have a front garden.
Oh, well done.
And I was out in my front garden working last week, I spent 2 days on my front garden and heard of 3 different cases of people having difficulty in accessing GP services in the county. One lady, which really concerns me, had so much difficulty that she eventually paid £50 for a private consultation. She was told that her problem would need a biopsy and she would have to pay £60 for that. That came back as malignant. So she's now got to pay £600 to have this lesion excised. It's a skin lesion excised. That concerns me in several ways. One, the wealthy who can afford it are getting the care, but what happens to those people that aren't? Two, our doctors, our GPs beginning to go down the route that the dentists went down several years ago? And are we on the thin end of the wedge of that? So primary care might become even less accessible as more GPs revert to private care. And I can't remember what the third one was now, but that was that. Another was about, it was an old gentleman who had pleaded in tears in the surgery for an appointment and still could not get one. He was told to go home and look at it online after midnight to see if there was any. Now this is a man who was in his 80s. I don't know whether he was digitally. And then another was a lady in her 80s with a lot of mental health problems. Couldn't her advocate couldn't get an appointment for her. She was told that a doctor would ring back and nobody rang. And that was in just 2 days of working on my front garden. And that's what the public are saying.
Deborah would like to comment.
All of those examples, Janet, are sort of not only tragic, but shouldn't happen, and absolutely don't for 1 minute diminish them. I think that in terms of, we have high access to primary care in Rutland, much higher than elsewhere. Maybe maybe we need to do more about connecting the right access to the right professional. So if we look overall at our outcomes, so our life expectancy, we've heard in the demographics, a lot of it is more positive than LLR and England average. That doesn't mean to say that when people need appointments, and you gave 3 perfect examples there where those patients needed appointments and didn't get them. So that we need to do something more about matching that access to the need, because there's something not quite triangulating for me there. There's the rurality issue, which I think we are aware about. There's a little bit more we need to do, because actually more appointments are given in Rutland than most of the other places in LLR. And I think, Mayor, I am right in saying that. You'll correct me if I'm.
You are.
Okay, so there is a bit, so in terms of, I wouldn't want the board and the public to go away with the Rutland are getting less access than elsewhere. There is still obviously a gap in need in the way in which we're using those services, which we need to pick up. So we will pick that up as part of the delivery plan and implementing the strategy. But you know, I absolutely agree with those examples that you gave. What we would encourage obviously the public to do where they're struggling is that they come through to the appropriate inquiries and complaints service so that we can try and pick that up. I think, Mayor.
You may, but I've also got Mayor with his hand up, so would you like to comment, Mayor? You've got your hand up.
Thank you. Janet, very sorry to hear that those patients are having those experiences and they shouldn't. What I can say is that currently there are national programs we are currently implementing across LLR around capacity and access improvement plans, where we are working with every single PCN who are working with their member practices to understand what the access gap is, identify what they can do and deliver, and these are kind of almost mandatory pieces of work that they're having to do. So across the LLR, with all of our 26 PCN, we are working very closely with all of them. Therefore, we will be working very closely with the Rutland PCNs as well. So these types of examples, I'm hoping will absolutely be able to pick up in terms of ensuring that the plan that they develop and want to deliver addresses these issues. So just wanted to give you that as some assurance. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to really emphasize, I didn't go out to seek those opinions. They came to me and told me, and they were distressed.
I absolutely agree with the points that you've said, Janet, and you know, we need to do better in getting the right access for the right patients.
Right, are there any other comments and questions about the primary care strategy? I'd like to pass my thanks on to Mayor Patel for that. And so the motion that the board notes is that the primary care strategy for Leicestershire and Rutland. So we're only noting the strategy at the moment. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Reluctantly, yeah. Anyone against? Any abstentions? So I would like to confirm that the board notes the primary care strategy for Leicester, Leicestershire and Rutland. I thought we might have to prepare for this one. The timings issue on meetings. The meeting should be finishing at 4:30. And so we have some options here. So under procedure rule 54, I can either extend this meeting by 15 minutes with any to cover the outstanding matters or not. So anyone, all those in favour of extending for another 15 minutes only, please raise your hands. Anyone against? And any abstentions? No.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to where I was. Right, 15 minutes and we're out of here. Okay, so okay, Better Care Fund 12, Better Care Fund, and it's back to Catherine.
Thank you. I can be brief. I just wanted to bring a report, and this is regarding the Better Care Fund end of year report, which was submitted on the 22nd of May this year, has been signed off by Councillor Ellison as chair and Kim Sorsky as director and ICB. So really just to say that the programme has been successful in delivering on its schemes. There was the only slight underspend was on the disabled facilities grant. It's very difficult to get the right figure for disabled facilities grant year by year. So it's just a slight underspend on that. In terms of metrics, there are 4 metrics from last year's report. First one is percentage of people discharged from acute hospital to their normal place of residence. So clearly we're looking for a high figure as best on that. The performance was 90.5%. The next metric, rate of permanent admissions to residential care, etc. Performance was good on that. It was lower than the target, which is positive. So we're sending fewer people into residential care. Third metric is the proportion of older people still at home 91 days after reablement or rehab being discharged from hospital. The target on that was 90%, and we achieved 96%, obviously excellent. The only metric where we didn't reach our target was unplanned hospitalisation for chronic ambulatory care sensitive conditions. And we've all obviously just had a discussion on access to GPs. Hopeful going forward that that will be improved, and therefore hopeful that that will possibly mean fewer unplanned admissions to hospital, because people are having their health needs met earlier and at home. There was also an adult discharge fund which started last year, as you know, which is focused budgets just on facilitating hospital discharges, supporting adult social care services to enable those discharges. And that was well used on schemes such as our in-house dom care provider, who they deliver reablement, and we also had some beds at Rutland Care Village for reablement, so that was well utilised. The plans for 23 to 25 are being submitted tomorrow. I've just included the budget on table 277 for 2023 to 24, which more or less includes an uplift of 5.66% on the previous year. So I'll bring back reports with regard to 23 to 25 plans at the next board meeting. Is there any questions, comments? Thank you.
You may ask.
Very quickly, if somebody is an older person is taken ill and refuses to go to hospital, he doesn't want to go to hospital, his wife can't look after him, and he's admitted to a care home and then dies after about 3 weeks, does his wife have to pay the care home fees, or does the council, or does the NHS? Who?
It would be an individual, you'd have to, yeah.
It's just a case that I've been asked about.
It's not really within the Better Care Fund, but you could, I'm sure, if people needed some advice, I'm sure they could contact Adult Duty.
Any other?
I'll give you the contact details. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions about this? Okay, thank you. So I'd like to draw this discussion to a close. So the motion is that the board notes the Rutland 2022-23 Better Care Fund end of year report submission to the BCF national team went on the 22nd of May 2023, signed off by the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and notes the update for the 2023-24-5 programming period. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Anyone against? Any abstentions? I would like to confirm that the board notes the Rutland 22-23 Better Care Fund end of year report, submission of which the BCF national team on 22nd of May 2023 was signed off by the chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and notes the update on the 23-24-25 programming period and to be updated. Thank you. Item number 13, updates from the subgroups. So Dawn, you finally get to say something.
I'll keep it really brief. Just in terms of Children and People's Partnership, we had our last meeting on the 15th of June. The priority one is actually contained within the Joint and Health Wellbeing Strategy, which is covered in Catherine's earlier report at item 11, Appendix A, which has a really detailed update in terms of the delivery plan. So please read it. just in addition to that, all the other priorities that sit with under the Children and People's Partnership are progressing, and progress is being made as expected. There's a couple of areas at risk, and that's to do with workforce pressures and workforce capacity, which cuts across both local authority and health colleagues. So in Catherine's earlier report, there was a bullet point around health assessments and for children and people. That's an ongoing dialogue that we have, particularly in relation to looked after children, and that's been picked up at the forthcoming corporate parenting board too, so I won't go into the detail. It is being addressed and really working with, you know, health colleagues are working really hard to kind of get the capacity in that specific health team up and running. From a local authority point of view, the workforce pressures are around filling vacant posts, but equally some posts are grant funded, and we haven't had future grant allocations confirmed from DfE yet on a couple of areas, so we can't renew contracts, if you like, extend contracts until we've had that. So it will work out, I'm confident. It's just it's a risk is all I'm saying, highlighting. From a SEND point of view, we've had a recent inspection. The report will be published, we expect, by the end of July. It will be a welcome report, and it's a joint area inspection across the local authority and ICB, and the partnership, including education and social care. We are expecting to be able to see the published report by the end of July. So I would suggest that we perhaps do a little bit more of an update in detail when I'm able to in public at the next Joint and Health Wellbeing Board. That's it.
Any comments or questions on that? No. And then we'll just pass on to Deborah on the integrated delivery group. Deborah.
So quite a few of the things that were discussed in the IDG have actually already been on the agenda. I won't go through those. Just to let the board know that our next meeting, which is in 2 weeks' time, we've got a women's advocate update for Rutland, and that's an area that we've identified, and we'll have picked it up from some of the demographics info. We're trying to do more work on women's services identified across the ICB, and then try and translate that into Rutland. So we've got a report coming to next month's meeting. We'll have our usual progress against the subgroups, and we're also looking at some emergency admissions data, which we've been trying to triangulate across all providers, because obviously over 50% of the population of Rutland don't go to LLR providers, they go outside, and so we're hoping we'll get that data formulated for the next meeting. I would like to bring Emma in very quickly to just talk about a piece of work that we've done around another area of difficulty within Rutland, and that's on dementia. We had a dementia report from Health Watch at the last meeting, and Emma's been involved. Emma Jane, sorry, I should say. Apologies, Emma Jane. Has been doing some work with the ICB on an anticipatory care pilot. She will also then be reporting back, I think, on the mental health group. So if I could bring Emma Jane in, please.
Lovely, thanks, Deborah. Okay, I did do some slides, but I'm not going to present them because I want to just briefly just update you. One of the things that Health Watch and obviously from our joint strategic needs assessment analysis has always identified is the low dementia rate in Rutland, and one of the factors that contributes to that is the lack of the memory assessment clinic being actually in Rutland, which it was prior to the pandemic. We've been working really hard with LPT and various other people over the last 6 to 12 months, and we are very pleased to announce that the memory assessment clinic will be coming back to Rutland Memorial Hospital, and the clinics are beginning on Wednesday the 12th of July. They'll be running weekly on a Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, with Thursday being specifically for Rutland patients. We have managed to link in through our RISE MDT neighbourhood facilitator a second room on the Thursday to actually look at how we can identify those people who may not actually be attending the memory assessment clinic for a formal diagnosis of dementia, but who may have been to the GP in the last 12 to 18 months with some sort of cognitive concern or issue. And at that clinic, we will have our Rutland PCN care coordinator who is able to do a GP cognitive assessment, one of our Admiral nurses from the team and one of our RISE team to actually then provide that holistic conversation about what else is on offer, whether it's a fire health safety check or benefits or carers or whatever that might be. We've chosen those 3 workers so we don't overwhelm people when they're attending the clinic with lots and lots of advice and information and lots of people to talk to. We thought those 3 people had the connections into the community and the voluntary sector. The letter that is going out inviting people to the memory assessment clinic will include a paragraph to explain that these other individuals will be there to support people, and the 288 individuals that our PCN have identified with the
sorry Emma Jane, sorry, I'm just going to have to stop you there. We're actually out of time, so I'll just hand over to the chair.
I'm sorry, Emma Jane. So we're now at 4:45. We do need longer to continue. Are we happy to carry on for another 15 minutes? Does anybody not agree with that? No, we can continue. Emma Jane, please, sorry about that, please continue.
That's all right, no problem. So the 288 individuals identified through our PCN will have an A5 flyer sent to them, inviting them to the Thursday clinics. We are also working with our colleagues who have been running the vaccination van to actually take the anticipatory care clinic out into the villages to actually access people out there who possibly can't get into Oakham to come and support that. And again, there will be somebody from primary care, Admiral nurses and RISE actually on the van in the villages talking about cognitive issues, dementia, and all things associated with it. So we're really excited. We have the final planning meeting on the 3rd of July to get these clinics actually running from that week beginning the 12th of July. You will be aware that with the papers, Healthwatch recently published their dementia report. We've been working really closely with Healthwatch, and we are going to be meeting with them during the summer to map the gaps that the project identified, and also celebrate some of the things that the report has identified as issues that we might be addressing as part of this anticipatory care pilot. And we hope to come back to you in October with a we said we did type of report that celebrates and both identifies the gaps that we want to work on further. So that's my update from Deborah's point of view for the IDG and the lovely project that we've got going there. Quickly on the mental health update, we are hoping to bring the mental health strategy and action plan to October's Health and Wellbeing Board. We've got a number of new workers that have started in the county. We're hoping to introduce something called the 3 conversations approach to supporting people with mental health. Pilot from this month. We have a worker called Victoria already started. We're just identifying a very close cohort of people that we can measure the outcome success of for that 3 conversations pilot. We're working with our RISE mental health worker to identify a suitable cohort. We had initially thought about personality disorder difficulties, but we are seeing an increasing number of people coming forward with relationship or bereavement that is causing them mental health issues, and therefore we might be using that as the support. The mental health pathway that you referred to at the beginning of this meeting has been published. You have had it and it has been shared. So that action has been completed. I'm more than happy to share it again should people not have seen it. We also have the groups that Catherine identified, and the success of those groups have supported our own Rutland Primary Care Network with an application to be Primary Care Network of the Year award. So we're very, very pleased that the experiences of our residents through those groups led by our RISE worker and GP lead will be hopefully suitably identified and celebrated as well. We also have a new mental health facilitator called Jeanette Bevan. We have had that post vacant for some time, and that is for those who are on the serious mental health list, actually get their annual review properly done on time. So we will be catching up with that, which is fantastic. One of the things that we are very keen to progress with is our experts by experience. We have a number of people, particularly from the groups, who have come forward who want to do some co-production work with our team. But we also want to start to think about putting some peer support workers in Rutland, which are a paid position, which is an incredible opportunity for people, particularly as we know that people with serious mental health illness find it incredibly difficult to find employment, paid employment and work. So we're looking at hopefully being able to bring that into Rutland and actually have some employment opportunities for that side of people. And just lastly, we had a voluntary sector LLR event last week, at which myself and Councillor Payne attended, and they were launching the Joy platform. Having piloted Joy in Rutland, it now hopefully will be progressing out to county and city, linking us all and our community all together. So that's my update on mental health as well.
Thank you very much, Sarah Jane. Any comments or questions?
I'll keep it very quick. It was a real pleasure to go to that particular event with Emma Jane, and the joy was great to see, and it was going to be a great success, and well done to everybody who's been involved in it.
Yes, I'd like to support that comment as well. It's been fantastic. Very good examples of care in the community. Thank you very much. Anybody else want to say anything? Okay. So we now got an update from Adrian Allen on the Staying Healthy Partnership.
Thanks, Chair. I will keep this brief. We brought to Health and Wellbeing Board previously the outcome of the workshops that we did around inequalities. The board is still working on the outcomes of those elements from the workshop. There is some pilot planning happening that's progressing well, with more details to follow to the Health and Wellbeing Board. There's a number of locations that we're looking at and that's yet to be finalised for that work. We're also going to be looking closely at the report regarding the Armed Forces survey and what next steps we can take, Sustained Health Partnership, and what we can work with the other subgroups on moving forward. Thanks, Chair.
Any comments or questions? Is there anything you'd like to add on to the board's work plan? Thank you very much. Is there any other really urgent business that we haven't covered?
I haven't been notified of any urgent business, Chair.
Thank you. So, date of next meeting. The next meeting is on Tuesday, the 10th of October, 2 p.m. in these chambers. And I declare this meeting is closed at something like
16:53.
16:53. Thank you very much.